So the half term is over. Welcome to the CBZ Ruck Show. We're back in the thick of things. Well, it's not like we ever left anyway. My name is Ruimbo Chakoreka, and as always, we're bringing you the latest, the hottest news in schoolboy rugby. In fact, in just school rugby. And today, joining me, things have changed up and shifted up a little. I've got Shingi. Shingi, it's always great to be chatting with you about rugby issues.
Excellent. Thank you for having me. I love being on the show, talking everything high schools rugby.
All right. Well, today we've actually got a very interesting show. We're going to be taking a slightly laid-back approach, but we don't go laid back too far. We've actually got Dr. Michael Passaportis. He's going to be joining us. He's a sports scientist and talking a whole lot about what he has seen so far in terms of our schoolboy rugby. But we've also got Liam Middleton. I mean, what a rugby brain. You saw what he was able to bring in one of the other episodes that we had. And he's also going to be talking about what he thinks coming up to the halfway mark of the schoolboy rugby season. And then we're also going to be looking at the CBZ Rugby Development Initiative. It took place at Prince Edward, and my oh my, the Sables are singing from Alan Wilson. They beat Churchill Bulldogs. That is a story that's not going to end. A little bit painful for me as an old boy from Churchill, but hey, take it on the chin and you have to move on. And then afterwards, we're also going to look at the upcoming fixtures, those that we are going to be featuring and some of the others that will be happening across the country before we get into the presenter's license, where I believe, Shingi, you've got something quite interesting that you actually want to talk about in terms of combining certain schools.
Definitely want to look at when in terms of the presenter's license. I just want to touch quickly on how we can uplift the ladies' game. Over the past 5-6 episodes of this show so far, we've been focused mainly on the men and the boys. But if you look at the CBZ Rugby Initiative, it's not just a boys' club only. There are girls' schools that are being featured in there as well. So if we can find a way to incorporate girls' rugby in the mainstream schools, such as Falcon, Middleton down there, you've got Prince Edward up here, how can we bring the ladies' game up to speed with the boys' game? And that's what I want to touch on in presenter's license.
All right. Well, definitely we are going to be touching on that and a whole lot more. So you don't want to go anywhere. Make sure you grab your cup of tea, grab your juice, whatever it is, and stay locked on. This is the CBZ Ruck Show.
Every achievement, every record broken, every standing ovation, every proud moment is a product of an empowering relationship. At CBZ, we believe in the strength of partnerships and growing together. Together, we have collaborated in building roads, offices, homes, and bridges. We have partnered in the fields, have gone down shafts and blasted quarries, all while protecting assets, managing investments, safeguarding wealth, and helping you transact. We have supported big and small businesses and the ones in between with a helping hand or sound advice. As we celebrate what has been, we look ahead towards what can be. And while we can count how long we have been around, our achievements will always be quantified by your success. CBZ, Partners for Success.
So we have our first guest for this week's CBZ Ruck Show, Dr. Michael Passaportis. Now, he's a former St. John's College, boy, and he also played rugby. I'm sure he wasn't too impressed with the 2 defeats that came through, but finally a big one over Falcon. Welcome, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us on the CBZ Ruck Show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I'm very glad to be here.
All right, so let's just start off with that one before we get into the discussion matters. Was your heart beating there when St. John's lost 2 on the trot there?
It got up there. The heart rate's got a bit up there, but I was really glad to see them come back with a strong victory against Falcon, which it's always a good one to get.
Oh, yes. Against Falcon, that's always a very interesting time. So let's get straight into it. You generally deal within the area of sports science, and you're also lecturing as well around all of that. Looking at where Zimbabwe schoolboy rugby is at the present moment and looking at the performance of these youngsters, Are you generally impressed as compared to what you would see from other levels and other standards that you've been exposed to?
Yeah, definitely. I think when it comes to sport, pressure is always relative, and it's going to rise with you as you go up through the competition. So a schoolboy at the moment is experiencing quite a lot of intense pressure for them in their situation. As they start to rise up through the ranks, that's just going to increase. So it's a really good kind of opportunity for them now to get used to those big moments, what that feels like, and how to cope with that. Because, yeah, as I mentioned, it's going to grow with them as they go through. But I think, you know, you look at the standard of rugby that we can produce in this country, certainly at schoolboy level, I think it's really exceptional. We have great talent coming through, great talent development pathways. So it's really impressive, and it's great to have this vehicle to be able to watch it.
All right, so particularly within your field, as we really break it down to the players and focusing on them, just where does the aspect particularly of sports psychology as well come into it? Because I believe sports science also incorporates that psychology, preparing the boys mentally. How much pressure do you think the players are really under?
I think they're under a lot of pressure. So pressure comes from multiple sources. It can come from within you, where you're putting pressure on yourself to perform. And I think if you're a first-team player, you are holding yourself to quite a high standard. So you're putting pressure from yourself internally. It's also going to be coming from external sources. So from your coaches, from the schools, from the crowd, everyone watching you. So they're under a lot of pressure. But I think the key thing to recognize is that in terms of sports psychology, we're interested in cognitions. So cognitions are our thoughts, because our thoughts ultimately drive our feelings and our behaviors. And I think if we think about what these athletes are experiencing now, they're under a lot of pressure, and that can cause us to think thoughts and doubts and have fear of failure or those kind of things around our performance. It's just how we're able to cope with that and to still be able to experience those things, but to go out to deliver, because I think there's a perception that if you ask a young athlete who a highly confident or a highly mentally strong player is, they'll tell you someone who's always confident and who's never nervous. But that's not really the case. Anyone who's stood close to a high-level competitor when they're about to perform will know that those people are experiencing the same things. They're feeling nervous, they're feeling anxious. So I think it's important for school kids to realize that if they're feeling these things, it doesn't make them abnormal, it doesn't make them weak, it makes them human, and that's a part of sport. So if we can have those experiences and still deliver on the field, that's kind of what we're aiming for.
All right. Now, there's also this discussion around, in particular, sports science being incorporated in sport, and the discussion is becoming louder and louder in the Zimbabwean circles. Now, dropping it down to school level, is this the time that we start looking at diets, performances, measuring all these things? And I know that Karas is also doing quite a bit of that, GPS tracking and so on and so forth. How important is it for us to start it at this level?
I think that's a really great question, and it's a balancing act. As I mentioned, these are going to be part of these people's career if they're going to go on into it. These are things they're going to have to be getting used to, constantly being monitored, constantly being tracked. It's always just a toss-up between keeping the love for the game and keeping it highly monitored. I think for me and around sports psychology, so we wouldn't think twice about working on an athlete's physical skills, working on their fitness, working on their strength. But the mental side of it is just a skill in itself, and it takes dedication and it takes practice. And I definitely think it's the time now, at this level, to get them to start working on those core skills that they can take with them, that can help them rise up through the ranks and deal with those pressures the higher up they get.
All right, so let's now maybe try and break it down, because we do know that there are different tiers of schools that operate with different budgets. So maybe I'm coming from a public school, a government school. How best can we try and work that out, especially in light of the fact that we've heard so much out there that natural foods work and, locally based products, not highly processed foods and things like that should be able to work for athletes? What would your general advice be for somebody that's in a public school system setup?
That's a really great question. I think probably you need to find a balance between simplicity and kind of how you can get those advantages, because if you're not going to have the capacity to deliver fully, it's doing the best that you can with what you've got, with still being committed to helping these athletes to be able to produce their best.
I think that will definitely be very important. Now, Michael, as we're coming towards the end of this and really culminating everything. So far, halfway down the track, we've seen different performances, and it's been flowing and ebbing for some. Prince Edward so far right now are just performing at a high level. They're undefeated so far. Looking at the likes of Gateway as well, they've literally risen from the ashes because last year they didn't have a great season altogether. What do you think that is attributed to, where teams can literally rise from the ashes and all of a sudden have a great season?
I think that's the kind of the really unique thing and the really exciting thing about schoolboy rugby is it comes in cycles. So you can be really dominant one year if you've got a team full of seniors or a team full of experienced players. Those players leave and you're now in a rebuilding phase. And I think for me that's the really exciting thing about schoolboy rugby is you're constantly building, and there's no one who's just going to dominate forever. You're going to go through cycles, and that cycle gives other players or other schools a chance to rise to the top and experience that. So I think it's just depending on what phase the school is in and what they're trying to achieve, if they're building or if they're going for it that year to be the most successful.
Well, definitely some really wise words there, and hopefully that you as a school, if you are in a transitional phase, I won't mention names, that you'll be able to go through them and be able to come out of them. But Doc, thank you so much for coming through. We appreciate, and I know that this won't be the last time having you on the show. There's so much that we have to talk about, especially going in depth within sports science and some of the things that have to be applied. But thank you so much for coming.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, so that was Dr. Michael Passaportis just giving us his thoughts, his analysis as to some of the things that can be done. Well, coming up next, we're going to be talking to someone very important, a rugby mind. The last time, so many comments came through and said, this is a brilliant rugby brain and we have to use him. It is going to be Liam Middleton. Stay locked on to the CBZ Rugby Show.
With CBZ Touch, pay for whatever you want. Transacting on the go. With CBZ Touch, my data, my bills, take insurance, special loan. With CBZ Touch, pay for whatever you want. Transacting on the go. With CBZ Touch, my data, my bills, take insurance, special loan.
Welcome back to the CBZ Ruck Show. Don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe, do everything, share. Do absolutely everything on our social media platforms. That is at Kairos Sports. We are also bringing you live rugby action, so you can also tune in and make sure you buy your data bundles. I know that might be interesting in this time and period, but make sure that you do follow up on all of the rugby action that we'll be bringing to you. Now, the next guest that we have is a man who is no stranger to the CBZ Ruck Show and not a stranger to the rugby circles. It is Liam Middleton. Liam, great to have you again. Lots to talk about today.
Always a pleasure, Ravi. Thanks for having me.
All right, so let's start off with the interesting one. Now, here's a school one with a controversial one. We had a conversation off air. He said that was 100% correct. And when it comes from a rugby brain like him, hey, we can't argue, can we, Liam?
No, absolutely. It was certainly a try. And I think the referee who officiated that game, I thought he had a really accurate performance, a young referee. I think there's probably a discussion we'll have later on, but I just felt that he made a really accurate call in terms of laws of the game. It didn't look obvious to everyone, but he's the guy on the field. He's closest to the action. He doesn't have a TMO. We looked at the video afterwards. He was 100% correct. Maybe we can dig into more of the detail later.
Oh, yes, most definitely. But I think we've got quite a number of things to talk about, and we'll start off with some of the aspects that do affect us on a day-to-day basis. And I'm going to start off with you as a coach. You are a coach. We've got many other coaches, the Max Madzivas, the Doug Trevellas, the Sykes Bandas, the Cyprian Mandinges. I think the list can go on and on. They have got massive pressure. They are coaching first teams, and there are lots of expectations. How have you, and I think I'll start off with your personal experience, how have you been dealing with some of the pressure that comes with coaching schoolboy rugby? Is it more intense than national team?
It's different. I think what you've got two types of pressure, as Doc mentioned earlier. You've got intrinsic pressure, which is you as a coach driving to win, striving to win, wanting to be the best that you can be and get the best results you can get. So that's your intrinsic pressure. What we've got to be very careful of is extrinsic pressure. So this is where you get pressure from external bodies. So parents, unions, school heads, those people not actively involved in the actual performance but are applying pressure. When your extrinsic pressure becomes too difficult or too hard, that's where you get a breakdown. Coaches then start to make decisions they wouldn't ordinarily make. They often project that pressure onto the players, which affects them further. So intrinsic pressure is something that we cannot get away from. That is, and if you don't have it, maybe you shouldn't be coaching. Like it's got to be a part of your everyday life. If you let that consume you, then you've got to reset your way of thinking about coaching, because the enjoyment will go. What we have to manage is the extrinsic pressure, which I think at a schools level is actually greater than a national level. I think at a national level, your intrinsic pressure is much higher. You've got the weight of a nation, as you would call it. Whereas at a schoolboy level, you've got this extrinsic pressure. A lot of parental pressure, sometimes from within the school. That's a difficult part of the game.
And you know, you mentioned that maybe it might be time to try and reset. Is this also pointing to the fact that maybe you might also need to step back from the job as well to try and ensure that your mental health levels are also maintained?
Yeah, and look, you see around the world a number of coaches who'll say, look, I'm taking a break from the game. I'm taking a break for 4 or 5 months from the game so that I can reset my perspective on the game. Certainly as a young coach, over the time that I've coached in different parts of the world and at different levels, I've almost regularly used a sports psychologist. I can remember when I first started coaching, I employed a sports psychologist, because you need to be able to manage that intrinsic pressure, and you need strategies to manage the extrinsic pressure, because if you buckle to both of those, you pretty much got to hand your whistle in and say, I'm done with coaching. So I know that those expertise are not available to everyone, and they may not be available to all schools coaches, but you've got to look into reading some books, getting onto some podcasts, getting onto information that's around you that'll give you strategies to deal with both your intrinsic pressure and those extrinsic pressures.
Oh yes, very important that you said that. So you can also watch the CBZ Ruck show, because we're also trying to ensure that that happens as well. So let's move on to the other part of the discussion. We're at the halfway mark now, Liam. Schools have played. You had looked at Peterhouse, most probably trying to emulate what Peterhouse currently have, Prince Edward rather, currently have right now, which is an undefeated season. They faltered down in Falcon. Your general overview of how the rugby has panned out, particularly within the matches that we've covered?
I think it's been pretty good, because one thing we want is a competitive schools program. You know, I would like to eventually see some form of league being set up where we can accurately measure schools against each other, because not all schools are playing all the other schools. So it's hard to establish who's strong and who's up and coming, because that depends on the fixture list. But some mixed results, which I actually must say are a good thing for the game. We can see that Prince Edward are really strong. I think they are both physically very dominant, but they're also playing a good style of rugby. Their ability to manage possession seems to be a highlight of their game. So once they get possession, they've got a very good power game, and it's hard to get the ball back from them. And as you know, rugby's a possession game. So I think they've really done well on the back of that, but there's still another half of the season to go and some big matches to come. And I think the interest in schoolboy rugby is brilliant. I mean, this is what this show is about. There's a lot of talk every Saturday evening about what those results look like. That's healthy for the game. We want that to stay. We want to grow that, actually.
And also another school that has generally done pretty well, may not necessarily be playing at what we would argue and say is the big boys table, but it looks like Sykes Sibanda has totally transformed the Gateway from what it was last season to what they are now. They're also currently on an undefeated run within the matches they're playing.
Yeah, and they've got some really talented boys at that school. So some good athletes. And what Sykes will do is he'll bring them some structure, some understanding of how to play the game. And so once you've got this pool of ability, they just need a direction to go in. And I would say that Sykes has done well to bring them into a point of this is where we got to go. And that's showing up in their results.
All right. There are some certain teams that are currently under pressure. Needless to say, the likes of St. George's as well as St. John's. St. John's has started a little bit, came back with that Falcon win. That's St. John's College. St. George's started off with a really good win, and then it seems like it's gotten lost somewhere. How do you think they can best find their feet? Do you think that this halftime break actually came at the right time?
It might have done. It depends on where they are as a team mentally, you know, what their confidence looks like. I wouldn't say that they are not a side that can beat any other side on the day. Also, you have to look at who they've played. So sometimes teams will have a run of really tough fixtures at the start of the season. They'll drop a couple of games. People will label them as having a poor start to the season, and then they zoom back again towards the end of it. And, you know, late July, we're talking about a team having had a really good season, but we forgot the first couple of losses at the start. The Crusaders actually have been very good at that in previous years, in long campaigns, about starting relatively slowly, but building their momentum through. So I think it depends on the fixtures they've had. Maybe they've slipped a couple, maybe they've come out of a couple on a good side. But I think there's plenty of rugby to be played, and I think we need to gauge the end of the season measure the end of the season as a gauge of how well these teams have done.
All right, and I think finally, as we're also wrapping this one up, let's look at the public schools participation. I think, how important is that? Do you think in the larger scope of things, in terms of building that player pool, player base for club rugby going forward, for us to actually have public schools participating? I think we look at Churchill, they've only played 2 matches and they've lost 2. They weren't able to fulfill the 2 other fixtures for various reasons and so on. But how important is it?
I think it's probably one of the key agenda points for the Zimbabwe Rugby Union. I think it's almost got to be at the top of that agenda list. And I'll tell you why. I've always believed that Zimbabwe schools rugby is too small. So there's not enough competitive games. So we're talking about St. George's, Prince Edward, Falcon playing St. John's, and you've got Peterhouse. And actually, you've really got this tiny group of schools playing against each other. That's not healthy for rugby in the country, but I actually don't think it's healthy for schoolboy rugby. We need 12 to 14 competitive teams at different levels. There's going to be your better ones and your slightly weaker ones, and you go through phases of good years and bad years. But right now, I think Zimbabwe schools rugby at a competitive level is too small. So where have we got to develop? We've got to develop in our government schools. There's plenty of talent, there's plenty of determination. It's just about getting good coaching structures in there, support from the schools, you know, the actual school body, and let's extend schoolboy rugby to 14 teams that are competitive on any one weekend. That's good for rugby.
So you believe that, say, if we get that league in place and get various tiers and divisions put together, do you think that will then spur things on?
I think it's one of the interventions that we need. We need that league, and it's probably going to be 2, because most leagues in the world are 2. You've got the French top 14 and the Pro 2 behind it. You've got to have 2 of them so that there's an opportunity for relegation and promotion that builds competition at both ends. I think this is the way we've got to go, because we can't have a scenario where we've only got a small group of schools that are competitive. And really, for that schoolboy who's so invested in rugby, he's looking at 3 or 4 big games in a season. You can't do that.
Well, definitely you've heard that one, and I think it continues to build the pressure that we've been calling for. There's a game that we want to watch, Liam, and that's Prince Edward versus Peterhouse. We want to see that game. We believe all of them have got physicality, they've got pace, they've got skill and power, and we would love to see that game happening. So, Dave, Sean, hey, give us a game. but it leaves me to say thank you so much, Liam, for affording us your time, and once again for giving us your insights. And definitely we're going to be calling upon you again towards the end of the season and really look at what we would have achieved.
Great. Thanks, Rovi.
All right. So that was Liam Middleton, a high-level rugby coach. He's coaching at Hellenic. He still stands by it. 100% correct decision. We know that the debate will continue, but that's for you to continue to do and for us to continue to analyze and look at. Stay locked on. It is the CBZ Ruck Show.
CBZ Bank brings you more convenience and more smiles. Introducing CBZ Remit. Now you can send and receive Forex anywhere in Zimbabwe without a bank account. No hassles, no stress. CBZ Remit is safe, secure, fast and reliable. Who can use CBZ Remit? Anyone. CBZ Remit is perfect for both CBZ account holders and non-account holders. To send or collect cash, all you need is your national ID or valid passport. US dollars or rands accepted. Receive your cash at any CBZ branch near you. 40 branches available nationwide for your convenience. CBZ Remit is very affordable. Charges only 2% of the money sent. Send and receive your Forex anywhere in Zimbabwe with CBZ Remit today. CBZ Bank. Partners for success.
So welcome back to the CBZ Ruck Show. Very interesting discussions that we've had there from Dr. Michael Passaportis as well as Liam Middleton. Shingi, very interesting points, particularly on coaches. You do a little bit of coaching yourself. Has there ever been a point whereby just like pressure is just too much, particularly externally?
Pressure is always there from yourself, as they spoke about intrinsic, but that external pressure can get too much. And I think recently there was the Springvale Festival, and you can hear the passion from the parents, which can boil over, which can be a little excessive. And I think when we were at Peterhouse, I did hear that some of the lower age group games that parents had been banned from watching those games. So I don't think you want to get to that stage where parents are told don't come to the sidelines to watch your kids play. But if it has to get to that stage so that undue pressure, that unnecessary pressure can just be lifted off the kids so that they can just perform, I think, drastic measures sometimes have to be taken. Yeah,
they definitely have to be taken. I mean, we've done commentary over the years, lots of games. The parents almost like as if they'll get into the field, to grab the ref or even get onto the coach and say, why don't you make this substitution and so on. I think we need to desist from that so that the game of rugby can actually go on. And talking about the game of rugby going on, we're talking about the CBZ Rugby Development Initiative. CBZ Bank, thank you so much. Double thumbs up, triple thumbs up, fire emojis. You know what the social media does. Thank you so much for helping this initiative to actually go forward. And just looking at some stats there, Shingi, is when we started the first rugby development initiative, we initially only had 3 schools, 3 boys' schools coming through.
Yep.
And in this third one, which was held at Prince Edward on the 17th of June, we now had 15 boys' schools. We started off with 0 girls' schools coming, and now we've got 6. So from 0 to 6, 0 to 100 real quick.
No, definitely doing something right. I think the key is the platform. For a lot of teams, Do they have rugby teams? Yes, sure. But where do they start? How do they get fixtures? How do they get into playing regularly? And I think we've seen it from the top there with Harare Province and the way that they've set up the league and it feeds down. Now it's schoolboy rugby, the same thing with the CBZ Rugby Initiative. They've set it up and said, you come to Ellis Robbins, you come to Prince Edward, we'll cater for the referee costs, we'll cater for the ambulance costs. Just show up. But now you need to show up on time and be a little more organized. But yes, that's a story for another day. But the platform is there. CBZ, well done for creating the platform, creating the initiative. And definitely, it can only grow from here.
All right, so interesting results that actually came about, especially in this third installment of the CBZ Rugby Development Initiative. Alan Wilson were on fire. And I have to say this tongue-in-cheek because Alan Wilson are getting one too many over Churchill now. They were the ones who won it this week, and well done to them. I think their rugby program has been developing in leaps and bounds. And I think what was quite important to also note was how they progressed through. So Alan Wilson did have a match against Ellis Robbins. They got over that. And then a lovely revenge match. Alan Wilson beating Goromonze.
Definitely.
How important do you think that was as well for their confidence?
Showing character, getting one back over someone who had beaten you in an earlier final, in fact, the first edition. So it's good to have the opportunity to redeem yourselves and to atone, but it's an opportunity to go back to the training ground, to actually improve your skills, improve your game plan, and come out and execute at the weekend. And yeah, Alan Wilson, very good. They even went through Prince Edward select team in the semi-finals. So it's a great indictment for Sables, which is Alan Wilson.
Oh yes, Sables doing very well there. I think you've already seen the war cry. It's already on the Kairos Sports Facebook page. If you haven't seen it, believe me, it's entertaining stuff. It's the stuff that you would obviously, get jigged up by. But whilst then, let's quickly talk about the final. They beat Churchill in the final. Churchill themselves obviously putting out a bit of a select side, tongue-in-cheek. A select side there, but nonetheless, a defeat is a defeat. Alan Wilson did it.
Yes, Alan Wilson, they got the job done. You can only play what's in front of you. So whether, people on social media are going on about Prince Edward put the Cubs and the under-17s and Churchill put the second team, it doesn't matter. The record will forever show that this Alan Wilson team came out and did the job against Churchill High School. And I think that's what counts. A win is a win.
Oh yes, we do have a couple of highlights that were put together as a package for the CBZ Rugby Development. This is the part that we tend to love week in, week out, where we look at players, what they did, those flashy moments that turned around a game. It is the Nutri-Active Play of the Week. And this week we're focusing on the CBZ Rugby Development Initiative. Alan Wilson beating Churchill and doing the most in that particular match. And Alan Wilson, as we've mentioned, they've been doing really well. we've been monitoring how they've developed their rugby, literally coming from the ashes, and now, what can I say, knocking on the door for the big boys table. Started off with that huge win against Churchill last year on Africa Day. I think that's an Africa Day that they will continuously remember forever. But you've also been looking at Alan Wilson. What do you think has also been a key part of their success?
I think leadership. If you look at Alan Wilson right now, they've got the Lady Sables head coach, Lisi. She's part of the setup there, and leadership counts. And you need to have the right people in the right places in leadership to really get you going forward. I mean, look across the field, across the fence at Prince Edward, they've got Sean D'Souza there. So you can't discredit the quality of the coaching that goes into it. And these kids on Saturday, they showed that they can play rugby, and you'll see it in the Nutri-Active Player of the Day, just how good they are.
All right. Also, more importantly, they are connected to a club, so that is also allowing them to participate in levels that are higher than they currently play at. How much of an important role does that play in terms of developing players? If you play in the under-20 league and then you come back down and you meet high school kids, does that give you a higher level of confidence?
Definitely does. I mean, we're talking about Alan Wilson having a similar issue that most of these government schools are having at the moment, which is they've only played pretty much 2 games out of the potential 4 that some of the other teams have played so far. So some of these boys, if they had not been exposed to any club rugby at all, it would just be pretty much 120 odd minutes of rugby throughout the year, and that is not good enough. That is not enough. And club rugby plays its part where they have an opportunity to play some rugby as well as at the high school level. But definitely Alan Wilson doing the job on Saturday.
And talking about doing the job, this is the Nutri-Active Play of the Week. Well, we're now moving on to the Kairos Worldwide Tracker, and the man we're going to be featuring is, yes, he has been doing some really good stuff. He's playing at the highest levels of French rugby right now. Of course, at the moment, just recovering from a little bit of an injury, but believe me, he's an explosive guy. His name is Tabani Maguranyanga, and I would love to see him in a Sables jersey one day, Shingi. He is absolutely explosive, quick, huge, and we're going to be featuring him.
Definitely. TJ is a unit of note, 194 meters tall, playing out in the wing channels. He is a terror for defenders, and hopefully one day soon he could represent the national team.
Oh yes, and we're going to be looking at him actually next week on the Kairos Worldwide Tracker, and we're going to be looking at where he has come from. He actually went to Falcon College in his very early days, but hey, we actually couldn't just keep that gift and contain it. He ended up going to St. Stithians down in South Africa and made various provincial sides from there. But all of that will be coming next week, so you don't want to miss out on that profile. We've also got an interview with him, which we are going to be featuring on the Kairos Worldwide Tracker. So don't miss out next week's episode.
With CBZ Touch, pay for whatever you want. Transacting on the go. With CBZ Touch, my data, my bills, take insurance, special loan. With CBZ Touch, pay for whatever you want. Transacting on the go. With CBZ Touch, my data, my bills, take insurance, special loan.
So this weekend is going to be absolutely explosive. Schoolboy rugby, in fact, school rugby returns to our screens. We're going to be featuring 2 games, and Shinge and I are going to look very briefly and quickly at some of the standout fixtures. Now, we've got 2 which we're going to be featuring live on the Kairos Sports social media platforms. And the first one that I will be going down to, and I think I'm now literally an Esigodini, a resident. I'll be going down to the Falcon versus St. George's match. That one is going to be a very important fixture. Both teams having lost before they went into the break. So it was a time to resonate and actually think on the season, Shingi. Where do you think this one will actually go to?
Well, we spoke earlier about pressure. This is as pressured as it gets. Both teams have identical records, 2-2. So 50% win records for both teams. Who is going to go down the rankings? So yeah, lots of pressure down in Escodini. While here in the capital we'll have Johns, actually not in the capital, up here in the north we'll have Johns taking on Peterhouse out in Marondera. That is going to be another cracker. Both teams with 3-1 records. Excuse me, Johns 2-2, Peterhouse 3-1. So can Peterhouse really kick on from that come from behind against Falcon? So very, very, very good matches on the cards.
I will say, in particular for Johns, they need the win more than Peterhouse, in my view. I think that starter on home ground kind of gave them a little bit of a rude awakening. That the season may not be as easy as they would like. And with some really tough fixtures coming up as well, not forgetting that they lost to St. John's in that derby on home turf. They now have to go to St. George's at the end of the season to win. And that could be another dent within their season. Many had high prospects for St. John's after the fantastic season that they had last year. So I think it's going to be a tough one. As for Peterhouse, I think if they do just get the win in Marondera, I think it will just be adding to what was already expected of them to have railroaded a number of teams. But we still continuously press for that Prince Edward versus Peterhouse match. So Dave, Sean,
Make it happen.
Make it happen.
Yep.
So we've got some other fixtures that will be happening as well. Hillcrest will be taking on Watershed. Kyle are making the trip to Lomagandi. So Lomagandi coming out of that big win against Churchill. They should feel confident in that one. And then Prince Edward were supposed to play a CBC, but apparently that match has been cancelled. And then Eaglesville will host Petra after their Derby Day loss to Gateway. They'll be looking to get back into the thick of things. And I think Petra is a fantastic school to do that against, because Petra isn't doing too well. Then Midlands Christian College are playing against the undefeated right now co-ed school of Gateway. Sykes Sibanda doing a fantastic job.
Yep.
Do you think traveling out to Gweru might be a difficult proposition for him?
I think this is the time to really now test yourself, travel fatigue, all of the logistics that come into play with traveling also come into whether or not the boys can react on Saturday. So it should be a good test for Gateway. 6 games on the spin, all victories. Now, Gateway are definitely the team for me for this year so far.
Oh, yeah, so definitely knocking on the big boys' table. Who knows, maybe Gateway might be calling for a fixture against Falcon Johns or St. George's. Who knows? We'll leave that to them.
Definitely.
There's a Blawayo derby that will be happening. Plumtree taking on Gifford. Gifford more recently receiving some balls from the Old Boys Association. So that should be a boost in confidence. But anytime Blawayo teams get to meet, there's hard tackling in there.
Definitely. Down in Esigodini, there'll be Falcon, Georges, there'll be Plumtree, Gifford down in Matland as well. So good rugby on the cards.
All right, and then finally a big encounter. Churchill will want to right the wrongs here, because it seems like Alan Wilson are getting one too many wins against them. But this one is going to be played, I believe it's at Churchill. Churchill will be hosting Alan Wilson. So Bulldogs against the Sables. Will it be Sables for meat? Will it be Bulldogs being totally rammed out of the way by the Sables? Who are you putting your money on?
Well, the unthinkable is happening. This Jeff Madaki coach Churchill team has won one fixture out of the 4 games they played, 2 in Derby Day, 2 in the regular season so far. That is a shocker, but that is what Liam Middleton was talking about, that it's cyclical. Different teams have a good bunch of seniors who then move on. Then you're left with raw talent, with juniors that then go on to struggle. But Alan Wilson Churchill, I think the Sables can do it. I think the Sables can get the double.
Not happening under my
victory
watch.
Last year, victory this year.
Not happening under my watch.
Sables for the win.
Bulldogs for the win. Bulldogs, come on, do it for me. Just for me. You've got to do it for me. So in any case, those are our fixtures for the weekend, but we are going to be featuring 2 on the Kairos Sports platforms. Don't forget, it is Falcon hosting St. George's down in Esigodini, and then Peterhouse welcoming the Rams. That is St. John's College. Now, let's quickly go into our presenter's license, and we've got a number of things to actually talk about. Shingi, you said there's a thought, an idea that you have which could really work, particularly for women's rugby.
We're talking about the CBZ Rugby Initiative. It is not just the CBZ Boys Rugby Initiative. This is for boys and girls. First edition, we had no girls on show. Second edition, third edition, we had multiple girls' schools. And I think we need to find a solution to how to increase the participation of girls in rugby. And I think the onus should be placed on the schools. If you want to be ranked in the top 10, top 15, top 20, if you want to be fixtured with the big boys, you need to have a parallel girls program going. So for Churchill, if you want to be recognized, go across to Roosevelt. No better way to motivate girls than having a boy coming across to the school to get a girls' touch rugby club going. Whether it's George's going down the road to Convent. I know some of these boys' schools now have girls, students on their books. But I think a concerted effort needs to be made for these boys' schools to send down the first team coach. If first team training is at 3 o'clock, send down the first team coach at 2:30. Get them to do a girls' touch rugby session, whether it's Middleton going across to girls' college, whether it's MCC making a, it does not have to be a hard, fast rule, but we just need a concerted effort to say, when Cal College goes across to Lomagundi, why are they not the girls getting the opportunity and the experience of traveling and the camaraderie that comes with rugby? And I think if we made a concerted effort to hold these schools to task and say, you are a boys' school, you do have the passion, you do have the resources, let's take a ball or two down to the girls' school that's down the road, and then we start a touch rugby club there, I think we will grow the game exponentially.
I think that's a fantastic idea, and I think girls' schools, some of them are actually open to it, especially if you're looking at the likes of Roosevelt, Queen Elizabeth, Girls High, Vinona High School. I think they've had very good rugby programs over the years, and they've seemingly just somewhat slid somewhere there. Even Royal College, which was playing in the CBZ Rugby Development Initiative, actually also used to have 1 or 2 victories, against these top schoolgirl rugby playing schools. So I think it's important, and hopefully it should get even the other private schools that are cooped up in town, I would say, because they don't have grounds to work at. But once there's that open initiative that is there, maybe it can work out. So headmasters, it's up to you. Sports directors, rugby coaches, I think it's up to you to actually do that. But whilst others are making the concerted effort, and as you're saying, let's put others to task, others are not actually coming to task. They are cancelling fixtures left, right, and centre. I think first and foremost, at the beginning of the season, one said, we are cancelling our fixture because we've got too many boys that are injured. So we can't fulfill our fixture. And then the other one came, we can't fulfill our fixture because we've decided that we don't have enough fuel for this and that. And then we've got a CBZ Rugby Development Initiative that is now put together for you to come and fulfill fixtures, and then you don't pitch up. I think it defeats the purpose.
Definitely. It's such a disservice to the boys and girls who want to play the game. Rugby is a very tough game, physically, mentally, to get yourselves ready, training sessions, gym sessions, and the like. And then Saturday comes and you get their teacher in charge doesn't care, or the headmaster doesn't allocate resources and time. It's disheartening, and as administrators, we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. It's not acceptable that a student can be late for an exam. So it should not be acceptable that the student or the administrators should allow students to be late for honouring fixtures. But yes, definitely, the PE Tigers, they are on a roll, 4 games on the spin, and then the rug is just pulled from under their feet. No fixture this weekend. It's sad, and administrators really need to be held to task about that.
All right, what about this one? I think this is the infamous one as well. Just about to seal the show. We are writing exams.
Nah, so the rugby is supposed to prepare you for life. These are life lessons of how to deal with pressure, how to come up with a winning strategy, but how to manage your time, how to manage your resources. And there's no way in life where you're ever going to just have one thing that you must do throughout your day. You need to be able to juggle multiple, commitments. And if these young men and ladies have committed their time to playing rugby, then they should learn to juggle their time between studying and honouring these games that they should be playing.
And that discipline is upon teachers in charge and headmasters and all those to try and help make sure that all of that is put together. But in any case, we could ramble along, we could rant, but ultimately, we're here to put out ideas. Would love to hear your thoughts and your comments around this. You can comment, of course, in the comment sections under this particular episode, and let us know, what do you think? Are your schools doing enough? Are you, as an old boy, doing enough to try and make sure that the sporting culture at the school that you learned is still being upheld? As a headmaster, are you allocating resources on time? Are you writing the necessary letters to cross provincial boundaries lines that have to be written on time? Is all of this actually happening so that we can culminate in what we are trying to achieve, which is a fantastic rugby culture in Zimbabwe? But that brings us to the end of the show. Shinge, I think we could go for 2 hours actually talking about rugby. But that is this week's episode of the CBZ Ruck Show. Don't forget to tune in for the live streaming of the 2 rugby matches. That is Falcon versus St. George's, St. John's College taking on Peter House out in Marondera. Those are going to be absolute humdingers. We're going to be doing commentary on those, Shingi, as well as myself. But up until next week, ladies and gentlemen, have a fantastic one.
Yes.